Hey everybody, welcome back to the Billy Club, the show where we take a look at the adventures of Marvel's swashbuckling Yellow-Bellied Fear-Man, as Tori so brilliantly pointed out in our first episode. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
And I'm Tori Sheehan. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I. Nico,
Now,
this issue.
Oh, this issue. Now, we're of course here to continue our investigation of Daredevil story by story, right? So we're going to give each one of these the time they deserve. Some cases a little more than, and that's going to be okay too. So speaking of two, we're here to talk about Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, #2, featuring none other than Jamie Foxx himself, Electro.
Ooh.
Now, this is a story by Stan Lee with art by Joe Orlando, inking by Vince Colletta, and lettering by S. Rosen. Now, this is our second issue and our second credit for Sam Rosen, but it's fine.
But he only gets one letter. One letter. Only
Maybe
one letter for the letterer.
he saved himself a little bit of time.
He did. He was like, I'm
Right?
tired.
He left the am out of Sam, and it's sort of like a statement of self, right?
Yeah.
Now, I do want to point out something you said in our first episode that was so correct that I had to put it in my notes to make sure that I didn't miss out on it.
Oh,
But
shit.
the book is still bi-monthly at this point, or it's at this point like initially, inceptively bi-monthly. And when you think about how Daredevil is always kind of like the second rung hero, it's crazy that he started bi-monthly.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's June now. And like, that's the thing is that I don't know if 2 months has passed in Daredevil time. I don't think it has.
So.
Karen still feels very, very new. They feel like this might be their first case. Like they don't feel like they've been doing this for 2 months. So
I agree. And it's important to note why this book was bi-monthly back in 1964. So for a period of time, DC owned the physical publisher that Marvel used to make their books and said, you guys have a limit on the number of books you can produce a month. So by making books bi-monthly, you could have more titles. So you could do, instead of 10 titles every 12 months, you could do 20 titles every 12 months by alternating them. Now, of course, the big names didn't get alternated, just Daredevil.
just the little guy.
Now, speaking of our little guy, he is, of course, still in his signature yellow suit. And I love that he's still dressed like a banana wearing a tomato, because it really helps to highlight why this isn't the sleek blue and red of Spider-Man. This isn't the cool blue jumpsuits of the Fantastic Four. This is a guy running around in yellow.
Yeah, he is very, very visible in this yellow outfit. I mean, not to say that he's not visible in red, but in the dark, red will fade in more than yellow will. And so I'm actually really interested. We've got a lot of yellow characters in this second episode. Electro's got a lot of yellow going on. The Thing is golden. Karen's blonde. Sue Storm is blonde.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a lot of yellow going on.
And, I can't help but notice that in the first issue, we talked about how so much of that cover space is given over to the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and logoing. Here, once again, the logo is a solid third of the cover. And, Electro is just about as big as Daredevil, who, from the looks of it, is mid-bicycle kick.
He was swinging, and then he had to do one of these.
Oh my God, that's the first time I've ever seen the rope.
I know. But you know whose head is bigger than both of the other heads combined? The Thing. He's now got as many covers of Daredevil as Daredevil.
That is amazing. I can't even believe that. And what's crazy is it's actually really misleading. If you look at this cover, it says guest starring The Thing, but it's a brief appearance. Don't blink your eyes or you'll miss him. I don't think it's all that brief.
No, it's not brief. It's actually quite upsetting how much he is in this. Like,
right?
Deeply upsetting. Especially as a person who doesn't really know a whole lot of this version of The Thing. I'm very used to it Michael Chiklis who plays him in the Chris Evans movies?
Yeah, and he's very avuncular.
Right. And he's like fun and
Yeah.
like working man, but he's not whatever this is.
Curmudgeonly and annoyed by everything and constantly frustrated by people trying to do their jobs.
But also able to fuse wood back together, which, like, to be honest, I would love.
It's kind of hot, right?
It's really, that's nice. I'd like to see what else he can crush.
Well, I think he could crush some Johnny Storm if the internet fan fiction is to be believed.
Hey, someone's got to not be in love with Sue Storm.
Thank God. That's one thing I need to give this Daredevil issue. For a book that could have immediately had Daredevil be like, oh, Sue is so intoxicating for the 2 seconds they're together, right? It didn't.
It didn't.
And I really appreciated that for a romance comic. They didn't try to shoehorn in a romance that I don't really appreciate.
Yeah, no. Well, it's actually also really interesting that for such a love triangle, Matt is very much staying out of it.
Yeah.
Completely. He's like not even engaging, to the point where I'm not even sure that he's said anything other than she's pretty, which she is. But like, he hasn't been like, I have feelings for her, but I can't because my life is a mess and she thinks I'm blind and I'm not. So like, he keeps a lot of secrets, but like, this is a very lopsided love triangle right now, but you know, it's supposed to be a real, like, true circle around love triangle.
I agree. I definitely get that vibe. And I think one of the things that really took my attention right away with this issue and the presentation of Matt as he sort of fits into this dynamic is so much of Matt in this story still feels very disconnected from Foggy and Karen. And I don't want to say this is a little bit more of that Marvel method shenanigans where person A does this thing, person B does that thing, and they don't really have to communicate too much in between. But this is another example where Karen and Foggy are not a B plot, they're a B story in the Daredevil law book.
Yeah, I think also because they have it so few issues coming out at the time, I think there is a push to make sure there's enough rock'em sock'em in there that everything else kind of takes a backside until they're like, okay, we have fans, now we can move forward. Like,
and I agree with your assessment for sure, because I think that's what like shoehorning Electro into this issue was.
Yes, Electro. Yes.
Yeah,
we're putting him there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my whole stance is you switch it to a K and an A, and we got us an issue. But for now, we have Spider-Man's electric bad guy, one of Spider-Man's electric bad guys. You know, it's such a common thing that people don't realize it, but a good portion of Spider-Man's villains are also animal related, right? A good portion of the Fantastic Four's villains are some sort of misformed by science kind of creature, right? A lot of the X-Men's early villains aren't just mutants, but they're mutant minorities, and it's a very specific kind of trope. There is no consistency to Daredevil's earliest villains because Daredevil doesn't really have a rogues gallery of note, with the exception of, you know, Leland and Jebediah. I don't really think there's a lot of...
I forgot about Jebediah.
I know, right? I don't think there's a lot of classic early DD villains, and that's why this appearance from Electro, who, other than I love the way their yellows play against each other in a really dynamic way, you know, it kind of... I feel like on that first page, that frontispiece, The Evil Menace of Electro, you can already kind of see where he is just sort of a cookie cutter character. And this him sitting over the city, this could be any city backdrop. I really love the image of Matt because that's maybe the first really Matt image of Matt. But I think that is the transition from Bill Everett on the first issue to Joe Orlando on the second issue, where Joe Orlando maybe a little bit more understands our characters, much to the fucking chagrin of what the Thing looks like.
You know, when we're handed other people's characters, sometimes we do great and sometimes we're like, you're just a caricature. It's fine.
And I do feel like that's kind of what happens, and it's funny because we've commented a little bit on how already Daredevil represents the everyman in a way that Spider-Man can't. Spider-Man, in his earliest incarnations is secretly brilliant, and then later on it's sort of retconned that he's secretly brilliant and secretly jacked and secretly charming with women. The nerd fantasy, having lived it for years, the nerd fantasy sort of self-insert has changed a lot over the years, and this book really has a lot of working class to it for a book about lawyers, and I feel like you can really see that in the art for this issue. Joe Orlando's thugs have a much lower center of gravity. They got a little bit more ass in those jeans, especially on like
We'll
the
get into
digital,
that.
right on the digital page 5 when this like fight starts up. It really gets that working class feel, but man, that the Thing in that opening sequence really looks like a hamburger.
So to me, A, the Thing looks terrible, but B, to me, it feels like there should be like sitcom opener music under this whole scene.
Yes.
Like it's that kind of feel, and actually that feeling kind of goes away in the middle and then comes right back the moment that the Thing comes back in at the end. It really, really does. Like I feel like you could play the Full House stinger music under all of this. R.I.P. Bob. But yeah, like it's a sitcom. Like he busted the door and I can hear that canned audience laughter.
Wanda would make this happen.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? It's that level of, and it's so interesting because I even think it's in the way Karen is sort of an abstract visual. In the 1980s, that image of Karen toward the bottom of her first page of the issue, that would be like a sunglasses ad. I know she's not wearing sunglasses, but you don't have to wear them to have it be a sunglasses ad. And she just looks almost like a prop. I don't know that I could tell the difference between Foggy and maybe, Osborn in this image. Like there's a lot of how almost everyone who isn't Daredevil suffers in this issue, which frankly, considering that Daredevil didn't look like Daredevil in his first issue, I'm pretty okay with the trade-off. But man, these first few pages, it is a really rough interpretation of some of those characters.
Yeah. I'm just always so fascinated by how like lifeless the Thing looks, particularly in the bottom right of this first paneled page. It like there's nothing behind the eyes. There's absolutely no expression.
No one knows what it's like to be a man.
He's like, we're going to DC to get more medals. Can you believe it?
About to get on a spaceship. Can you be a little bit fucking excited as you jump out of this?
I ain't got time to hang around here. I gotta go.
I also think that perhaps Reed is a little lifeless on that next page. That one shot of his face where he's just like, it's really severe. And I mean, by no means are we making fun of the artists of the 1960s any more than we would comment on the artists of today. These masters of their craft worked so hard to develop these voices and these figures and these positions. What we are perhaps talking about is the assemblage of the ideas, perhaps the lack of support that a number of these artists had. By today's standards, you would be able to do all of this on your Wacom in Photoshop, and you could make that shit look beautiful and then go over and do your logo in Illustrator. And exactly. These guys couldn't.
No, I'm still fascinated, like, on how they put all of this together. Like, I literally, like, there was a moment where I was sitting on the train and I was like, so they have to do the lettering on like sheets of translucent paper, right? Because like, what are they going to do? Like, have them pencil everything, then the letterer goes in, then the inker goes in? Like, what is all this? I can't imagine. I honestly can't imagine. how thin your pen has to be, like, to get these little
Mhm.
details on these little bitty pages, which I know are bigger in real life when they're drawing on them, but
But
still.
still,
But still. But you know what that kind of space on the bigger page lets you have? The kind of detail that goes into the back of Matt's thighs on the second panel page. I'd
oh
like
my
to
God.
thank Mr. Orlando, Mr. Vincent, Mr. Mr. Vince Coletta. I'd like to thank them both for
I
everything.
I would get gay if I wasn't gay looking at this. This would make me gay. And like I want to thank S. Rosen, maybe Sam Rosen, maybe it's a different Rosen,
Sam
but
Rosen was just like, I'm gonna
I'm
put the
not gonna
letters
cover
up
it.
here,
Way high,
up
up to God.
here.
I can't get
slip
over
slip
how
me them
perfect.
ankles.
Yeah, the calves are so
Mm.
perfect. And there's something about, we make all of these jokes as modern audiences about the difficulty in capturing fingers and capturing hands. And there is an attractive dexterity to the holding of the cane on the bottom of page 3. There
Mm-hmm.
is certainly an element of physicality that if Daredevil doesn't have, you notice right away. I feel like perhaps an Iron Man book where it's so much about the big, beautiful armors and the widescreen panels. I think perhaps you can get away with a little bit more of a pinup style to an Iron Man book. But even Daredevil at its pinny-uppiest best, where Klaus Janson is doing those, like, long vertical buildings for Wilson to have 7 stacked panels in. Right? I know, I can't wait.
I
But
love them.
even when you're looking at those, the movement in those buildings with the wind on the ground and the light moving at angles through the windows, like when Daredevil doesn't have movement, everyone can tell.
Yes, yes, very much. I think that's one of the great things about why I'm so glad that he has the Devil Shadow in the first issue, because it does set the tone for how we're going to be approaching light sources, that movement in so many of these things. It's why a lot of times when we're distracted by the art, it's because it feels static when it should be in motion.
I agree. And I feel like the motion of Daredevil, I mean, fucking Bob Hope vaudeville cane yanking a motherfucker
Mm-hmm.
right off the page. Now, in our comic, Kid Riot, I literally use a device like this as a joke where a character named the Vaudevillain yanks someone from off stage with a magic crook. And here we have 1964, Stan Lee doing the best he goddamn could, imagining how a not so blind man might be a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
And he imagined this guy is going to wrap that little cane around this dude's neck and yank him. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to thank him for leaving behind what looks like a croquet mallet and a hat. But I also want to say that Dee is stacked on that page. Like,
Yo,
no
he
one's
got
fucking business.
thick. He got real thick. His pectorals are greeting me. Deeply.
They're like, hey,
yes.
They want you to know. It's very that. It's a sexual moment. It really is.
It really is. They
He
want
looks
to
a little bit
remind you.
Caddish.
Yes, I think it's because in this one, he doesn't so in the I'm gonna flip back to the cover. No, I guess he does have a V-neck, but in this one it's like a wide V to like a shoulder tips as opposed to the normal like crew like t-shirt V like that I would be wearing and exposing myself with a microphone. But in this one it's very much it's a very glam red carpet V-neck, and he's showing us some deep man cleave.
And
for sure.
I think one of the things that this costume does really well is it creates shadow really well. Throughout this fight, the amount of times that all of the density of the red is sort of stripped down to a bare essentials black really does create sort of a shadow fighter out of Daredevil in a way that I think is kind of necessary to the boxer motif. If we're talking about how this issue lends a lot of credence to the reality of the everyman of Daredevil, I think we can then say that this issue also lends a lot of credence to that being his fighting style, whereas the first issue was a lot of
flippy
yeah.
gymnast stuff. And that's the thing with Daredevil, is that Daredevil has multiple styles of fighting. He has his boxing, he's got the martial arts, he is very gymnastic-y. He's got a lot of different flavors to him. And so I think this is a really great way of showing him doing some really great strength work today. He really works the weights, the whole throwing an engine
with a tire.
Which I wrote down. I was like, that's not how that grade of rubber works.
No.
It's not how that works. If that's how that worked, there would never, screeching tires wouldn't be a thing. You'd leave like ravels of rubber behind.
He would bounce to a stop all the time.
You just can't. So yeah, so the fact that he can just like, this is definitely the strength of Daredevil, which I think is really great. And it also shows that he's smart enough to use different uses of physics to get the kind of strength that he's looking for.
I very much agree. And I think in some ways, when you're talking about bad guys, one of the things you kind of need to accept is an elemental bad guy, unless they're specifically demoted in some way, but an elemental bad guy is a fucker. And I don't think of Angel being able to go up against Magneto. I think about the time Iceman did it. I don't necessarily think about how it would be easy for Mole Man to fight the Human Torch. I kind of think that's a Doctor Doom level thing. When I think about Electro, it's really hard to think about a lot of street level characters that could take him down unless the Punisher is massively insulated like an oven. I don't really see Punisher taking down Electro. So I wonder if in some ways giving Daredevil what we're going to call Optimus Prime level strength out of nowhere was to kind of balance out how big a deal Electro ultimately is, because believe you me, I would not want to fight Jamie Foxx. There's a lot of things I want to do to Jamie Foxx involving full contact, but fighting isn't one of them.
No. And like, it's still the 60s, so no one's using the whole, like, your body uses electricity to move. Like, we're not there yet, but
right.
Like, no, you don't want to fuck with electrical people. You don't want to fuck with water people. You don't want to fuck with air people, fire people. Like, no, you don't rock people. You don't want to do it.
If it's a bender, don't fight it.
Yeah, exactly. When they're like, oh, I'm a firebender, I can steal the airbender. I can steal the air from your lungs. I'm a waterbender. I can dehydrate you to the point of desiccation. Like, no, we don't fuck with this anymore.
No.
I'm a metal bender. I can take the iron out of you and make you really sleepy.
Firebenders can burn the oxygen out of your lungs. Like, there's so many scary ass things. Or electricity. Firebenders, you got your lightning.
Do they get
benders.
Electricity too? I haven't watched the shows. I should.
Oh, it's so good.
I know.
So I feel as if one of the major hard parts about this issue is we get so close to what Daredevil is going to be, but it's still got vaults to go yet. When I take a look at the sort of formatting issues of Daredevil defeats the bad guys mid-page 6, and then the bottom of page 6 introduces Electro, reminds us his backstory. Page 7 starts with some Electro, then Daredevil changing his clothes. And like, I don't want to be crazy, but I don't think anybody gay worked on this comic, because they would know that costume would be visible beneath a white shirt any day of the week. That much yellow under a see-through white shirt, no undershirt. What is he thinking? Like, nothing. Everyone's gonna see.
He's no thoughts, just backpack.
Just backpack.
Is this backpack this time, or is backpack later? I forget.
He definitely looks like he is just trying to change into some clothes that he found on the roof.
I also want to know why Karen has an 8x10 glossy of Matt in her desk when she's not his agent.
It's a really classic thing that I have to wonder if the world was different. And I mean this really seriously, but it is a common thing throughout Stan Lee and later Chris Claremont comics that people stare at photos of people they really could not logically have. there's a number of Xavier looking at Scott and his wife Madeline in bed photos, and they're from Scott. Like, Scott sent them to Xavier. So Scott had someone in their bedroom mid-coitus to take this photo and send it to Xavier. So there really is a weird trope throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s at the House of Ideas, where one of those ideas was send weird photos of yourself to people.
This is what swingers do.
Yeah, back when people used to call them swingers. Now, all joking aside,
Opposed to ethical monogamous, unethical
monogamous. Yeah. I think the Karen stuff here is maybe the closest we get to a love triangle, and I'm not sure everyone in it is aware it's a triangle at this point. Right now, this just seems to be a plot the geometry points kind of romance, and people are just drawing circles.
Yeah, this is Karen is pointing at Matt. Foggy is pointing at Karen, but also Foggy spends a lot of time pointing at Matt, and I don't think he knows he does, because to be honest, the first time we met Foggy, he is looking at Matt with the most adoring face possible over their law books. So there's a lot of that. And then Matt is over here like there's like a dotted line to Karen, or like, and it goes up the z-axis and then comes back down to Karen. and then he's sort of just like, yeah, I'm good when it comes to Foggy.
I think some of the Foggy sexual tension with Matt that's in the books in the early 60s is the only way we can sort of contextualize the infantilization this adult man has for another adult man. Like, I don't think Stan Lee saw gay in it. I think he saw man looking at man adoringly because he's so impressed. But like, we know Matt is the most capable human. So it's not like Foggy is actually looking out for Matt. And by recontextualizing it as a blind level of almost a beta submissive adoration, and not in a judgmental way, because there's a lot of people who benefit from being a beta in a romantic relationship. Not like, oh, he's like, some soy boy beta cock, like, but, having him be the beta to Matt in a way that does reflect romantically, that does reflect, even if it's not an outright sexual desire for Matt, I could really imagine him being like, my buddy Matt, he does great with the ladies. Let me tell you about this one hot chick. I'm like, why are you bragging about your friend in bed? That's the kind of level of dedication that at the bare minimum, you have to see Foggy has for Matt. It's hard to read this any other way unless you put that really weird infantilizing spin on it.
Yeah, the more that you're talking, the more I can see that this is like the bumbling ex-jock older brother who's just like really proud of his bro who went to Harvard.
Yeah.
And like can't shut up about it. And he's just like really proud of him because, like this one time he lost his sight and it's like a big deal. And so I can definitely see more of that now, but like it does come off very like, I'm all about Matt.
It really does. It is a level of dedication that I think, this second issue, it might not introduce the red costume, but it does kind of give us a more certain Karen, a more specific Foggy, and it also gives us stuff like the radar. Like, radar actually pops up on page 9, and even if it's not like exactly what we know disruption of the radar to look like, the bottom of page 9 has the sort of disruptive radar that we come to know he experiences a lot. There's a ton to this issue that is at the heart of who Daredevil becomes.
Yes. I agree. This is also when we start having things like Daredevil's law work, like runs parallel to his vigilante work. And this time, at least, he's working for the right people. We will see very soon. Daredevil, Matt Murdock, has a habit of just being like, yeah, sure, this criminal that I fought last night, let me be his lawyer. That's suspicious. how are you gonna win, Matt? So yeah, so this is also the fight. We're leading into the fight at the FF Tower, is I think what it's called or whatever.
The
That
Baxter Building at some point.
yeah, yeah.
At
And
some point.
then Electro knocks him out. So like this is the first time that we've seen Matt sort of like lose a fight.
Yeah.
And then he's like, instead of killing this guy or tying him up and leaving him here, I'm gonna put him in a rocket and send it to space. And then he does that, first off. And then Matt wakes up and he pilots the rocket down into Central Park, I think.
Where he immediately begins riding a horse.
Then he rides a horse so that he can go and catch a helicopter.
With his cane. The same
With
cane
his
he hit
cane.
the guy by the
With
neck
his
with.
cane that he grabs, and then he holds on to it like some fucked up Mary Poppins thing.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
He's Mary Poppins combined with Chris Evans's giant biceps holding a helicopter back. We do get our first splash page on page 16. We haven't had one before.
And it's
very
so beautiful.
Gorgeous. Tiny Matt, big helicopter, big building. Very nice.
The colors at this point are so fucking incredible for this issue. Beautiful. I love the depth of saturation they put into some of the gold tones for Matt during the fight with Electro, and then the sort of dense darkness of the city in the sky is so stunning.
Purples and fuchsias.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
So gorgeous.
It really has like a sea feel to it.
Yes. And I also love the shade of yellow that Daredevil's outfit turns when they're in the dark in the building. It's a really gorgeous color. Really, really nice. Takes a lot of that clowny warmth out of it.
Agreed. Because he often really does look like a banana. He looks like a magic school bus. And like, it's not even the fault of anything but the level of color print available at the time. These retouches on Marvel Unlimited look beautiful. We're super grateful for all of the work that everybody has done on these. It's just, it's still really hard when you're looking at a giant yellow man kicking a giant yellow and green man.
Yes. And then we go to the theater. And have all of the showgirls and the lights and the catwalks and the hemp ropes, and there's so many things here that like my theater heart is like, no, don't touch that, because like he's swinging on an arbor and I'm like, it's not rated for your weight, that's gonna come crashing down. Like, these things are balanced to within an inch of their lives. Don't actually climb up the curtains on a show. Like, if you're scared of something, don't climb up the curtain. You will bring the whole thing down because it's weighted. The curtain weight is balanced with the weight of the arbor on the side, and if you pull on it and put your whole body weight on it, it will cause an issue. And the arbor on the other side has about 2 tons of pig iron, about 40 feet in the air, and they will come crashing down and they will shatter and you will kill everyone with shrapnel. Don't do it.
So wait, I'm not a cartoon cat with weightlessness abilities?
No, you are not.
Oh my gosh.
And neither is Daredevil.
Which, okay, the geometry of this fight is much better than issue 1.
Oh, this is a much more fun fight than the Fixer fight. This is a very like interesting fight. The electricity that he's throwing has all of these great things. It's very, very cool.
The one thing I will say is you can see where Joe Orlando would really appreciate to have eyes on Daredevil, because a lot of the faces he gives Electro are these passionate, manic faces that I can see being given to the Joker today. Like, some of the work on Electro in particular is, even by 1964, brilliance is still brilliant today. Whereas, I take a look at Daredevil on page 20 and there isn't a decent shot of his face. I take a look at Daredevil on page 21 and there isn't a decent shot of his face. And there's so many great shots of Electro in this same time. And all I can think is that it's losing his eyes. We can even see Orlando do a lot better on the Matt stuff, especially like page 22, where Matt kind of looks like an action figure a little bit. You know, the sunglasses really do take some of his activeness away, but it's still better than squinched covered face that I feel like you can almost see Joe Orlando resent.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that, especially because of how much detail he puts into the muscle groups. I'm like, he would love to have some like face work to do with here.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, a real
And
shame.
I think the other real shame is perhaps the storytelling format that is so successful for Daredevil isn't a glimmer in comics' eyes at this point. We're still sort
Mm,
of looking at a world where your rising action is 10 pages and your resolution is 1 page.
if
And
that.
yeah, if that. And I feel like that's something that we see very much with this issue, that Electro isn't dealt with until the top of the final page
Mhm.
is really tricky for me because I don't know that I saw the fight go anywhere. I don't know that I saw Daredevil become smarter and able to fight Electro. I don't know that because Daredevil isn't super strong. I know here he throws a car engine with a tire, flies a rocket ship, rides a horse, which he then jumps off of to grab a flagpole, which he then gets to the top of the building, rides a helicopter across the city, and then fights an electric man while climbing the curtains of a theater. I do know that that is what we're talking about, but it doesn't feel like he gets smarter. It just
No.
sort of feels like I described the actions of a cartoon cat. And
Yes.
that's not the same thing.
Yeah. The only thing that is like him that he notices is like, oh, the control panel. I'll just push all the buttons and hope that one of these curtains falls. Like this is very much like a luck thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not that impressed by like Daredevil's skills being showcased in this fight.
I agree. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of, it's sort of the hard part of balancing a book where the character's alter ego is as important as their costumed identity. That's the Spider-Man of it. Spider-Man is the duality of it. Superman is the duality of it. The X-Men, not so much. The X-Men, they love their personal lives, but they're a soap opera, and it's a very incestuous soap opera. Most of the drama they need is from within their own halls. Daredevil sort of creates his drama where he needs to. And I think what sucks is the really interesting plot of this issue is somehow the Fantastic Four patent work. And that's reserved for 3 pages. And the uninteresting part, Daredevil fighting someone else's bad guy where he doesn't get any smarter for it, takes up 19 pages.
Yeah.
And that's for me, the other thing is you had an opportunity to have Karen talk to Sue.
Well, now in fairness, Sue thought about Karen with all her little thinky thoughts, and it was about her hair.
It was.
It was about her hair.
It was.
But it was not about a man's hair.
It was. Okay.
So
Well,
we are getting closer to passing the Bechdel test.
one man has pebbles for hair and one man's hair is a matchstick. So, it's just really lucky that they didn't both think about Reed's hair, I guess, because they would have found a way. It's unfortunate because Karen, even at her most agency, Karen is one of the most tragic characters in modern superhero comics, even at her most agency, that for many of us in the Daredevil community, the pinnacle of storytelling is Born Again, which is, character assassination beyond anything that had ever been done to a 1960s character like that. And I mean, gorgeous assassination.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's a lot.
It's a lot.
For her.
And, to see Karen have this really meager beginning and, so many of the revisions that go into fixing the 1960s the way comics loves to do put Karen in a lot more position of intelligent action. And here I really can't help but notice that she is a gal Friday. And that's really heartbreaking as a guy who loves who she becomes in the Marvel universe.
I don't even think she's a Gal Friday right now. She is a faceless future love interest, just my secretary right now. She does, like, honestly, besides the fact that everyone's like Karen, you would not know her name.
No,
Like, she has no defining characteristics, she has no defining issues.
she's got that buffon.
She's got the buffon, and she's got an innate sense of how many people she knows who could possibly fix this guy. And that's about it. She's got like 15 people in her life who can fix this guy. I was like, Karen came from a large family of optometrists
and like medical experts, and like, we know that is not the case.
No, God no. So like, that's all she is like a smiling blonde hairdo, and it sucks, but also, like, considering that right now Foggy Nelson is just a guy who bumbles around and wants to marry the blonde, like, that's it. And Matt's barely, we know he likes the law and we know he has a secret. Outside of that, Matt Murdock's not a fully formed character.
No, he's really not.
He's not. He's got none of that. I don't even think we know he's Catholic at this point.
No.
I don't think so. Like,
no.
He's got no guilt, really. He doesn't mention his dad at all this episode. Like, he's just a guy. He's the most milk of milk toasts there is in this fully white and yellow issue.
And I can't even imagine what kind of world we're talking about where we're saying the everymanist everyman is a blind lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, that almost takes effort, because, you know, something that we definitely see now is when people try to make their main characters everymans, they kind of feel like nothing, because we want to follow somebody exciting. And even if they are an everyman by trade or by position in life, that doesn't mean make someone boring. And not that to say that there can't be characters who are at like a steady beat, but like, you need to have something that sets your character apart. And so far, all I know about Daredevil is he has two jobs.
Yeah.
He has law job and he has big muscle punch job. And they don't even look like the same character.
No.
Like, it's not even like when Batman stands and he's got that big fucking chest, and it's like, this is almost a Clark Kent level of hiding it, but he's not trying to strap it down. So I don't understand why there's no visibility to his musculature, especially because we see him just put a dress shirt over the costume. So I know I'm nitpicking there, but there is sort of a sense of this feels like two different titles. There is the Daredevil punches Electro book, and then there's the bookends. And it really does not feel like anybody on the creative team is involved with crafting both yet.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to see them mesh it together better in the future, because I know that they do get there. But right now, this is a mixed bag of pages, and very few of them are good.
I agree. And, you know, that's the kind of danger when you're talking about these 1960s comics, but that's also the magic of them, because while, yeah, that first year is so tough, it was bi-monthly. So we're just talking about 6 tough issues, man. That's issues.
It. Yeah.
And so then we're red costume. We're at Karen has some volume of agency. I know she's not quite a woman possessed of her own ability, but she makes decisions. She talks about quitting the firm. She talks about trying to further her own life. So it's still very submissive to Matt, but it's like actual dialogue. And I need that from her. The problem is Foggy's going to suck for 50 fucking issues.
He's going to suck for a very long time, even after he gets married.
Yeah, to Debbie, right?
Oh, God.
Yeah. So,
Debbie.
I mean, this second issue of Daredevil, it's so interesting because Daredevil makes that joke of, trust me, man, it wasn't easy losing the Fantastic Four's clients. And that's kind of the signature of this book.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks Matt is the most helpless, hyper capable person in the world. And at a certain point, I maybe feel like the writers relied on us to underestimate a person with blindness. And it doesn't always translate well. But for that, I'm very grateful for that sort of tongue-in-cheek 60s of it that you pointed out in the beginning, that sitcom.
The sitcom. It's all sitcom.
It kind of takes a little bit of the burn off.
Yeah. Although now I do want Wanda to take the Netflix cast and put them in a Dick Van Dyke set and make it all happen, because I would die. I would just die.
Daredevil as Mayor Tyler Moore.
Oh my God.
Foggy as Rhoda. It's right there. It's right there. Stick can be Phyllis because he's old.
Yes, he is old.
Right? But until we return to talk more about the Yellow-Bellied Fear-Man, as it were, and the introduction of one of, I believe, our favorite Daredevil villains of all time, the precious, the wonderful, the Owl. I have been Nico Action, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NicoAction.
And I've been Tori Sheehan. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan, and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I.
And until next time, stay fearless. Let me go finish the shot.
Oh.